I'm Emma. I am VP of Platform here at AutogenAI.
Hi, I'm Chip Scheller, Chief of Capture Proposals, and I head up go-to-market strategy for the U.S. for AutogenAI.
Chip, so I wanted to ask, what concerns do federal contractors raise most often when they're vetting AI proposal tools?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that we hear often from prospects and from clients. And that's really, what happens to my data when it's in the platform. They worry that the models are being trained in it. They worry that we're doing something with it. They just don't really have an understanding of what happens to the information. And it's all highly confidential. If it's not company confidential, it's, the government has put some kind of classification on it. So they need to be assured that when the information is in the platform, that it's being cared for and it's being maintained and kept at the right classification. But what we always tell them is that the system is entirely closed, that there's no sharing of the models, that not even our own engineers have access to that information, and so that they can be quite confident that their information is not being used inappropriately, being shared outside of the system, it's not being released to the web, and the models, most importantly, are not being trained on it.
I can speak to this a bit from a technical perspective. Your data is secure within the boundary of our FedRAMP High authorization, obviously, but also within that boundary, how we use that data, how we treat that data is something we take a lot of care and consideration for. Our system doesn't train on the data, as you say. Your proposals aren't used to improve anyone else's proposals, either directly or indirectly. Your proposals remain your proposals. You mentioned the closed boundary there a bit. I wanted to elaborate on that. Basically, in our cluster level for our federal product, every exit point from the cluster, so egress points, are vetted and controlled, authorized. Every ingress, the same. So within this boundary, there's no risk of, the internet AI accidentally searching something it shouldn't on the open internet. Some bad data somehow coming in and polluting your data, your outputs from AI within this boundary. Both of those are impossible at a system level.
Yeah, that should give folks a great deal of comfort in knowing that their information is being well cared for within the platform. One of the other areas, as you were talking, that I was thinking about was this whole idea of just basic compliance.
Yeah.
So I think there's this idea out there that FedRAMP moderate is certainly sufficient. And I think it might be in certain instances.
Yeah.
If you're a subcontractor, the prime needs to know that you're working within that type of environment. Your contracting officer, if they've set that stipulation on that RFP, on that requirement, on that information, needs to know that you're fully complying with that requirement and that we're all doing things the way that we're expected to do. The implications are profound and existential for contractors that don't follow these rules.
Yeah.
They could lose their ability to contract with the federal government altogether. So there are serious consequences attached to this. I think the other thing that we need to think about too is that, the FedRAMP High authorization, because we can offer them sort of a scalable environment that not only allows them to meet those low to moderate requirements, but we can also help them with IL5 or ITAR related requirements and to really sort of move into defense sector work if they need to do those kinds of projects. And I think, underscoring all of this is this idea that we can speed up things for them. So they don't have to worry about whether or not they comply with the requirement. They're already there. They are working within an environment that is fully compliant with those strict federal guidelines, that it doesn't matter. They can move in whatever market direction they need to as an organization.
All those doors open for them. So when they do want to make a decision to swiftly move into adjacent market, that's already ready for them. They don't need to slow themselves down. Yeah.
Exactly. And then there's also like this mission readiness flexibility idea as well, which is if the government asks them to respond. So maybe it's something, beyond just wanting to move into a particular market sector. Maybe you're working for a client agency that wants you to expand your program offering and help them in different ways.
Yeah.
They're already ready to do that.
Gotcha.
They've got the right tools in place to enable
so this
that
decision isn't necessarily something that they make, we want to move into a new sector. It can be actually an external factor like the government asking you to move into it. Interesting. So we talked about the benefits of using a secure tool. One thing I'm curious about is from a proposal leader's perspective, what are the risks that come with using a non-FedRAMP High authorized tool for your proposal capture and development?
I think that's a really good question. And the reason is that the risks are, the risk is concrete and it's immediate. If you're working on a contract that requires NIST 800-171 compliance, or if you're flowing down CMMC requirements, your entire supply chain, including your software tools, have to meet the standards for that. A proposal manager using a non-authorized AI tool to draft a proposal or a technical volume is simply introducing an uncontrolled data pathway to the entire workflow. And we've talked a little bit about the sort of unintended consequences of such an action, but we know that they can be profound and existential. And, we know that now this is really not a theoretical problem. This is a problem that a company would have to contend with in a DCMA audit. It's going to show up in a cybersecurity assessment, and it's going to put your entire ability to execute or perform on that contract at risk.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I think this is something that really needs to be talked about more. And I want to be precise about what non-authorized means, because there's real confusion in the market. A tool that's been assessed against FedRAMP High controls by a 3PAO, but doesn't carry an actual authorization, that's not authorized. It might be well secured. The team might have done serious work, but from a compliance standpoint, your ISSO is looking at a vendor risk assessment where the tool has no marketplace listing, no authorization chain, and no continuous monitoring obligation. So that's a different conversation than handing them a package ID and a marketplace link at the high impact level. So beyond the compliance exposure, there's a practical leadership problem. You can't build a repeatable process around a tool your security team hasn't blessed. So you end up with individual contributors using whatever they can find, no standardization, no quality control, and your proposal manager has no visibility into what's actually happening. And even if the data you deal with now doesn't require FedRAMP High, you don't want to find yourself in a position where, you've limited yourself and locked yourself into a specific federal market, right? So you don't have the flexibility to move when the government may want you to move, or you might not have the flexibility to move when you decide that you want to move into a different market or do some adjacent work, things like that. So if you're pursuing DoD work, if you're working in ITAR controlled programs, if your prime operates in a GCC high environment, the tool you adopt today should be the tool that scales with your prime, your clients, and your growth objectives.
Right? You want it to grow with you and not limit you.
Exactly.
That's really interesting, Chip. Thank you very much. So most people in this space talk about FedRAMP High as a ceiling, AutogenAI as authorized as high, and to my understanding, that actually satisfies the moderate and low requirements at the same time. It's a superset of requirements. Why does this matter for a contractor working in moderate today?
Yeah, another really good question. I think this is one of the most misunderstood aspects of FedRAMP, and it matters enormously, right? So FedRAMP High is not a separate track. It's as you said, it's a superset. And when a tool is authorized at high, it has inherently satisfied every control at moderate and low. So if you're a contractor today and your compliance requirement is moderate, which covers the vast majority of federal work, you're not getting a tool that barely clears the bar. You're getting a tool that exceeds it by a significant margin. And I think that's what's most important here. And your compliance requirements are only going in one direction, right? The tool you adopt today should be the one that's already where you're going to need it.
Absolutely. So our platform is designed to support IL5 or even IL6 as needed. The list of cloud providers that actually support IL6 is quite short. So if your current proposal tool tops out at moderate, or even worse, something like moderate equivalence, which, as you've discussed, is not the same as authorization, and FedRAMP itself is very clear on that point, that authorization and equivalence are separate things. You're going to be facing, for example, a second vendor evaluation the moment your contract requirements escalate. And as you've mentioned, they always tend to escalate. They never de-escalate. And from just a security standpoint, High simplifies your vendor risk assessment immensely because your ISSO doesn't have to evaluate whether all your tools meet the specific impact level on a case-by-case basis. The High authorization basically covers that as a blanket. and simplifies that process. It's listed on the FedRAMP High marketplace with the authorization date, all the usual continuous monitoring obligations that come with such authorization, and you're able to point at that and show that. So that's basically one conversation you can have once and be done with, rather than having to do these conversations multiple times using a moderate equivalent tool.
Yeah, I think, what you're saying, it really resonates. And I think it's making some really good, important points here. I have another question for you. What risks do proposal teams take on when they rely on non-authorized tools? What happens then?
So I think there are probably 3 layers of risk, and they tend to compound and interact with each other. The first, and a very serious one, is data exposure and how your data gets used. So if your proposal content, that's win strategies, cost models, technical discriminators, basically the gold dust, your intellectual property, is processed through a tool that doesn't have proper data handling controls in place, you risk exposure, and you also risk indirect exposure. For example, if the model is trained on your data ultimately is helping someone else, and you don't want to be in that position. I think this is true for both consumer-grade AI tools, so that's your ChatGPTs and things like that, but also government contractor-specific platforms that claim to be compliant but haven't gone through the authorization process, so might struggle to prove this level of compliance. Right. I think what you generally are looking for is a tool with completely closed down and secure boundaries. So that means all egress is controlled. Your AI models aren't making random unauthorized calls to rogue API endpoints outside of the boundary. Every egress from the boundary is vetted and controlled. And likewise, all the ingress is controlled too. So access is locked down to your corporate networks, your corporate devices. So you know that no one else can access or has that point of access to your data. And the second is compliance risk. So if you're flowing down from DFARS 252, or you're subject to CMMC requirements, using an unauthorized tool is literally a material gap in your security posture. I want to be specific here, because using a tool that's assessed against the requirements there, but doesn't actually carry the FedRAMP High authorization, in the eyes of a compliance officer, someone vetting this still is non-compliant. You don't have that authorization. It doesn't change that, a non-authorized tool won't have a marketplace listing. It doesn't change the answer when the auditor asks the question of hey, are all your tools at this level of compliance? The third one, I think you're best positioned to talk to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think this is the one that people underestimate the most, right? That's competitive risk. So your technical approach, your pricing strategy, your teaming structure, that's the intellectual property that differentiates your offer from that of your competitors, right? So you want that data inside a boundary where the controls are verified. The authorization is documented and the security posture is continuously monitored, not just assessed once and left adrift. So, and on a fourth, as I'm thinking about it, that's opportunity cost, right? So every week your proposal team spends waiting for security approval on a tool that can't clear that bar, is a week they're writing proposals by hand, while their competitors are using AI to produce sharper, more compliant responses in half the time.
So you want to have the efficiency benefits of AI, but also of swift security approvals that you basically don't want to lose out on speed on either side of that. In real terms, what opportunities for customers become viable once a team can use AI in these compliant environments?
So the biggest unlock really is volume. In federal proposals, the constraint is almost never a lack of qualified opportunities. It's really throughput.
Interesting.
So we've got usually too much, or much more than we can actually ever deal with. So a proposal team that can safely use AI to accelerate first draft, cross-reference matrices against the PWS, generate initial outlines from the solicitation, and iterate on technical narratives inside a secure environment can pursue more work with the same team. And in a market where win rates hover around 30 to 40% for most contractors, increasing your at-bats by even 20 to 30% has a direct impact on revenue.
I see. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then I would say beyond volume, there's quality. Okay, so when your team isn't spending 60% of their time on the mechanical work, like reformatting, cross-referencing, compliance checking, they can spend that time on what actually counts, right?
Strategy.
Exactly. Shaping, I always say telling your story. So it's shaping or sharpening your discriminators, refining the solution narrative, and pressure testing the evaluation criteria, alignment. So, and I think these are the most critical aspects of a win. And here's the line I keep coming back to, which is AI doesn't just make your proposal process faster. It can make you the best proposal instead of the second best one. Right?
Yeah. So, it's winner take all, right? So.
Yeah. And I think we get hung up on this efficiency narrative too much, where it's actually the qualitative aspects of the proposal that you're improving. The efficiency enables this. And I think that's, for me, as a proposal manager, as a proposal writer, I think that's always been the thing that's been the most appealing. You know, in a competitive evaluation, the difference between a win and a loss is often just a handful of points. And the team that used AI to do 3 or more revision cycles to pressure test every section against the evaluation criteria, to catch the compliance gap before the reviewer did, that's the team that moves from competitive range to best value. And that's really key. And so that's not just a marginal improvement. That really has a revenue impact, right? But here's the other thing. You only get that quality improvement if the tool understands proposal workflows at a deep level.
I see.
And I think that's been foundational to what we've done in terms of developing the platform here. You know, a platform that bolts proposal generation onto a broader acquisition intelligence suite is going to give you a first draft, a tool that was purpose-built for a proposal that understands how Section L maps to Section M, that knows the difference between a strengths-based and a trade-off evaluation, that's been designed around how color teams actually review content. That tool gives you a first draft reviewers can actually work with. You know, that's a meaningful difference between AI that can write a paragraph about your technical approach and AI that can write a paragraph your evaluator will score as a strength. And that difference comes from how the tool was built and who built it.
Absolutely. And for teams already operating in a GCC high environment, the integrations that exist really, really matter, I think. So when an AI proposal tool connects natively with Microsoft GCC High, SharePoint GCC High, or Salesforce Government, all of the tools that are already inside the authorization boundary, it fits into your workflow that your users might already be using, rather than creating something where they need to move out of the suite of tools they're using into something else, then switch back and forth. So it becomes part of the workflow and augments that rather than interrupts it. And I think that's quite important.
I think so too. And if I were to kind of wrap up this whole kind of topic that we've been discussing here, I would say a compliant AI environment doesn't replace the proposal team, right? It gives them back the hours they need to do the work that actually scores.
That's super interesting. Thank you so much, Chip. What impact does this level of security have on the speed, the confidence, and the competitiveness of proposals that people produce? Is the impact positive, negative? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this one I kind of draw back on my own personal experience, which is I find that speed is the most visible impact.
Gotcha.
When your team can use AI across the full proposal lifecycle, from initial capture planning through final production, without stopping to ask, can I put this in the tool? At every stop, you eliminate that single biggest source of friction in adoption. Workflow becomes continuous instead of fragmented. And there's no airlock between the compliant work and the non-compliant work. It's all inside the boundary. Confidence is the second order effect. And it's just as important. So the way to think about it is that when a proposal manager knows that the tool is authorized at the highest federal impact level, not equivalent, not assessed, but actually authorized and listed on the FedRAMP marketplace. They're not second guessing themselves. They're not hedging. They can direct their team to use it and know that if the prime asks, if the CEO asks, If DCMA auditor asks, the answer is clear. Here's the marketplace listing, here's the package ID, here's the impact level. That confidence level, that confidence changes behavior.
Yeah.
It moves AI adoption from a quiet experiment on the margins to a standard part of the proposal process. And, for companies trying to maintain good standing with the federal government, that certainly isn't a nice to have, right? Mm-hmm. It's a condition of doing business. And I guess I'll make one last point. So about competitiveness, that's the compounding effect. The contractors who can safely integrate AI into their capture and proposal workflows are going to write sharper responses, pursue more opportunities, in turn proposals faster than teams that are still doing it manually or waiting on tools that can't clear the compliance bar. Mm-hmm. Right. So over 12 to 18 months, the gap becomes significant.
Yeah.
And this is a market where days matter on every RFP.
Yeah.
And teams with authorized proposal native AI tools are going to have a structural advantage that widens with every pursuit.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, every advantage matters. The margins are fine here.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So we've been really digging into these ideas of efficiency within the proposal process. So I'm curious, at least from your perspective, how do you see having FedRAMP High authorization remove friction in proposal reviews, security approvals, and customer due diligence?
So in our experience, and I think this might ring true for other people too, the single biggest delay in getting new tools into the proposal team's hands isn't the technology review.
Right.
It's the security review, the compliance side of things.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think, especially true in the federal space, right? So your ISSO has their own checklist. Your prime has vendor security requirements that you need to meet. And increasingly, your customers are conducting their own due diligence checks on your supply chain too. If your AI platform can't produce a clean, verifiable, point at it and say, here you go, type of evidence to these questions, it can really stall the process. And stalling could just mean slowing down, but losing weeks in that process. Or worst case scenario, it could mean that tool just doesn't get approved. You don't get to use it.
Exactly. Yeah.
FedRAMP High authorization, I think, really eliminates that friction in that process. So your tool is listed on the FedRAMP High marketplace as authorized. Your ISSO has a package ID, a date of authorization, not just like a white paper that they point to. You can hand your prime marketplace link saying, here you go, this is the tool we use, right. Not just like saying, oh, we're secure, we've checked ourselves, and hoping they take your word for it. You don't need to go through the process of mapping your controls onto their requirements. Right. You can just say, here you go. Right. And that just simplifies everything. And when the due diligence gets specific, the answers that you can give are concrete. So ITAR ready, restricted to US persons, all data at both processing and storage at rest, it resides within the US, all infrastructure is in the US. All system access is US persons only. Also, some other sides of this, there's no internet-connected agentic AI flows. All the workflows are contained within the environment. This also extends to things like egress controls, where every egress from the boundary, so every API call, every external query, all of those need to be vetted and allow listed rather than allowed by default, which is true in many commercial environments, for example. We also have the continuous monitoring of over 400 controls in place and the NIST compliant security incident reporting obligations and the process to back that up in place too with 1 hour notification, etc. These aren't just commitments or hey, things that we say we do. They're things that we do and an auditor has verified that we do independently. And it's all part of the security package that's available there.
It's so important for people to kind of understand the level of rigor and complexity and the extra mile that we've taken organizationally to ensure compliance with all those requirements.
Absolutely. And that changes the procurement conversation from let us explain why our security is adequate, let's hope you trust us and are convinced by this, to here's a listing, here's the authorization, and here's the authorization date, here you go. That just simplifies the process immensely, I believe. For companies that are trying to maintain good standing with the federal government And that especially for small and mid-sized contractors, compliance finding can be an existential thing for them, right?
Right.
So this level of compliance and authorization, it's not just a nice to have. I understand it to be basically a condition for doing business in the space.
I'm thinking as you're talking that there's a compounding benefit here, and that is once the tool clears security review for one contract, the authorization carries across your entire portfolio.
Oh, interesting.
Right, so you're not re-justifying the tool every time you pursue a new opportunity.
Gotcha.
Your proposal team just uses it.
Yeah.
And we're coming back to this idea of efficiency, right? Because we're in the right place, using the right platform already. The way your proposal team uses any other approved system is the way they're going to use this proposal platform, because it already meets that authorization level approval. And that's when AI actually becomes part of the process instead of a one-off experiment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And that's where you want to get to, that it's part of your process. It's speeding everything up rather than just a proof of concept, just something on the margins.
Exactly. Completely integrated into what you're doing in the business, into your business process and practices. Exactly. So this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed exploring these topics and ideas with you.
Likewise.
And understanding from a technical perspective the importance of FedRAMP High authorization. I'm a proposal practitioner. That's the space that I live in. But to understand sort of the true importance of it and why it's so critical for our prospects and clients is really been helpful. So, as I'm thinking about all the things we've talked about, I think the last thing I really would like to know from you is, what do you think proposal teams should be looking for now as they're evaluating AI platforms? What's important from your perspective?
I think first, ask about the authorization that the tool carries and be specific about it, because this can be a little slippery. So not, are you FedRAMP compliant? Because compliant or equivalent, even though those terms do get used, are not FedRAMP terms in themselves. You need to ask, are you FedRAMP authorized, and at what level? So that's a really important distinction to make, I think. What's your package ID? Can I find you on the marketplace? If the answer to any of these is like no, or you get a very hand-wavy answer, a few paragraphs long, that should be a bit of a red flag for you to say like, oh, they aren't authorized. They might be meeting some of the requirements or processes, but they don't have that authorization necessarily. It's going to create a completely different compliance conversation with your ISSO when that time comes, if you're choosing a tool that doesn't have authorization.
And I think, let me offer you a second one. It's evaluate how deeply the tool understands proposal workflows.
Yes.
Right. So I think that's been critical to at least my work here and working with the product team is making sure that the process or the workflows that are built into our platform complement things that proposal teams are already doing today. What I know from personal experience is that generating text is one thing, and it's certainly critically important. But there's other aspects of how we parse the RFP, how we break apart those requirements, how we build out the outline in a way that allows me to respond to those requirements in a way that is both compliant and responsive.
I can just speak from an engineering perspective on this. We've seen how closely you've been working with the engineering team to develop this side of the product over the last 2 years, basically. It's something that comes with a lot of deep domain expertise. And you've done such a great job of transferring that to the engineering team, making sure the product development team knows about the federal landscape, how to respond, what the workflows are, and has really baked that into the product that they've built.
Well, thank you. And I'm really glad that that work is been fruitful. I think you can really see that now reflected in the platform, that it's truly reflective of the kinds of things that proposal teams need to do. So, key to that idea is that, there are platforms in the market that cover the full acquisition lifecycle, right? They do business development, they do pipeline intelligence, they do capture, they do proposals, they do knowledge management and post-award, but they treat proposals as one module among many.
I see.
At our core, we are a proposal development support tool that was developed by proposal writers for the sake of helping proposal writers produce better content, to win more contracts, and to do it efficiently. So we've got the needs of that proposal writer in mind.
That was such a differentiator, especially in the early days of the company, where most of our leadership were proposal writers themselves. So figuring out what the next feature to build was, you would just ask them and they knew what the pain points were. That, I think, is a differentiator for the company now, and it certainly was when we were starting out too. And to bring the conversation back to the questions that you should be asking when vetting tools, I think one important one that you should really drill down into is system and data architecture. How does the system use your data? Does it ever train models on your data, even if that data might be anonymized, for example? Can the vendor in any way see or access your proposals, maybe in a privilege escalation scenario where they're troubleshooting something? Does your content stay inside the authorization boundary, or does it pass through some kind of external service at any point? You should also be asking about, is all access restricted to US persons? The right answers to these questions are verifiable architectural facts of a system rather than just policy promises, Your capture intelligence, your pricing strategies, your teaming arrangements, all of these are your competitive assets that differentiate you from your competitors. The tool that you use to process these, to synthesize these, that should treat these with the same importance and care that you would treat this data.
If I could, let me just kind of wrap this up with a sort of a final thought.
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing I want people to think about is that the federal market is moving fast, and that 18 months from now, every serious federal contractor will be using AI in the proposal development process. And we've seen AI gain momentum over the last 3 years, ever since we've been in this space. And it's not whether or not we're going to use AI or adopt it into our workflows or our business practices, it's which tool.
Yeah.
And whether it was built for how federal proposals actually work or not. And I think that's what's critical. And we've spent the time. We've built a workflow that is directly aligned with the way federal contractors work. We use standardized processes. We're fully compliant in our ability to parse and create outlines from not just the unified standard contract form of RFPs, those section L, M, and C types, but even those complex task orders that are multi-documents. So, we've built a platform that is, as you would say, fit for purpose. It meets the needs of the federal market space. And I just invite people to take a look at it. I know people are going to feel very confident about the security architecture we have in place, having heard you speak about it today. And again, thank you. This has been a great conversation.
It's been amazing. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chip.
Thank you all for listening. If you're interested in learning more about AutogenAI, please visit our website and book a demo. We would love the opportunity to share the platform with you and talk to you about the advantages it can have for you and your proposal teams in the federal space. So thank you.